Actually, I wasn't going to make a video about my Blood Knight PvP build because I hadn't changed much from my latest release. But since we got some new essences since then, I've incorporated them into my so-called regular PvP build for Blood Knight. I'm still using Skewer, Siphon, Swarm of Bats, and Sanguinate for my skills. If the enemy team has too many players using damage over time skills or effects, I switch Sanguinate with Transfusion because it counters that quite nicely, but most of the time I stick with Sanguinate. Before we move on, I want to remind you that we are getting close to 10,000 subscribers. So if you aren't subscribed yet, please do so we can reach that goal a little faster. By the way, I tried other builds with Whirling Strike and Swarm of Bats with the shoulder essence that buff your primary attack, but it didn't work that great for me. However, I'm seeing a lot of people having success with that build too, so I'll show that one as well. It didn't work that well for me because I didn't have the proper set items, but it should be alright for you if you use the correct ones. So let's talk about that. First of all, for the primary attack build, we are using Sanguinate, Swarm of Bats, Whirling Strike, and Skewer for our skills. And for the set items, you should use 4 pieces of Vithus and 4 pieces of Gloom's Guide. Since you have 9 stacks of dash with this build, Gloom's Guide is a must-have, and we are dealing most of our damage with primary attacks, so the attack speed increase from Vithus is really important as well. Now, let's check out the legendary items we are using for this build. For the headpiece, we have Siren's Grin. Whirling Strike's maximum charges are increased by 1. For the chest, we have Count of the Eves. Whirling Strike also grants 5% damage reduction per enemy hit for 4.8 seconds. This effect stacks up to a maximum of 6 times. For the shoulders, we are using Torture and Torment. Swarm of Bats now causes a small swarm of bats to circle you. When you use a primary attack, a bat swoops down and bites enemies. For the pants, we have Faces of Fading Mirth. Swarm of Bats now also poisons enemies, causing them to take 6.4 thousand continual damage for 3 seconds. For the main hand, we are using Indulgent Calligrapher. Whirling Strike now causes you to dash forward, damaging and knocking back enemies in your path while also applying a stacking bleed. Whirling Strike can be activated again up to 2 additional times, with the final strike hitting all nearby enemies and knocking them up. For the offhand, we have Sprig of Hawthorn. Skewer also increases your damage done by 19% for 4 seconds. And for the additional main hand, we have the Besalver. Skewer now causes you to leap into the air and slam into the target location, knocking enemies up and stunning them. Lastly, for the additional offhand, we have Mooncall. Shadow's Edge also increases your primary attack speed by 10% for 2 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Well, this is the primary attack build. If you are looking for something different, you can give this a try. Now, let's move on to the other build that I was talking about at the start of the video. Like I said at the beginning, I'm using Sanguinate, Swarm of Bats, Siphon Blood, and Skewer for my skills. And for the set items, I'm using 4 pieces of Grace and 4 pieces of Mountebank, but if you don't want to use Mountebank, you can use 4 pieces of Gloom's Guide to increase your damage and critical hit chance. Now, let's check out the legendary items we are using for this build. For the headpiece, we have Horns of the Hexed. Siphon Blood is no longer channeled and now moves with you, dealing damage and draining the life of nearby enemies. For the chest, we have Teeming Grotto. Swarm of Bats also destroys enemy armor, increasing the damage they take by 19% for 3 seconds. For the shoulders, we have Solemn Snare. Swarm of Bats now shrouds you in a fog of blood mist, increasing your movement speed and making you untargetable while also dealing damage to nearby enemies. For the pants, we have Faces of Fading Mirth. Swarm of Bats now also poisons enemies, causing them to take 6.4 thousand continual damage for 3 seconds. For the main hand, we have Broken Corsic. When Siphon Blood damages the same enemy 3 times, it causes them to hemorrhage, dealing 9,000 additional damage. For the offhand, we have Sprig of Hawthorn. Skewer also increases your damage done by 19% for 4 seconds. And for the additional main hand, we have the Besalver. Skewer now causes you to leap into the air and slam into the target location, knocking enemies up and stunning them. Lastly, for the additional offhand, we are using Soul Sensor. Skewer now shatters the enemy's armor, increasing their damage taken by 19% for 3 seconds. Well, these are the 2 different builds that I can recommend right now for Blood Knight, and I'm using Gladiator with both of them, but you can give Champion a try as well. I think that's all I wanted to say about these builds. If you have questions or suggestions, let me know in the comments.